Something is happening in our skies, in our forests, and sometimes right in our own bedrooms when the lights go out. Patterns are emerging, sightings, encounters, and phenomena that refuse to stay in their own lanes. Tonight, we sit down with someone who has lived in the crossfire of the paranormal her entire life. Anna Scott isn't just a witness, she's a biologist, a nurse, a researcher, a MUFON State Director, and an investigator who has seen UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts, and psychic events. Not in stories, but in her own experience. And while most people spend their entire lives trying to make sense of one mystery, Anna has walked through nearly all of them. What connects these encounters? Why do some people become lifelong experiencers? And what does her scientific training reveal about phenomena the rest of the world still laughs off? Tonight, we follow the evidence, the intuition, and the unmistakable patterns that are beginning to form. This is the Paranormal 60, and it's about to get interesting.
I'm not gonna stand here and listen to this baloney. He won't float. He doesn't stand for baloney.
Sounds like a lot of supernatural baloney to me.
Supernatural, perhaps. Baloney, perhaps not.
Good evening, my darklings, and thank you so much for tuning in and spending a little time with me here tonight. For those of you watching live, we're an hour early. Why, you may ask? That's none of your damn business. Geez, just shut up and watch the show. No, actually, we've just had some issues here lately, and streaming services have been very weird in and around my town. So I've spent the last 2 days battling extensively with MetroNet to get on the air. And this was the time my guest was available. So we accommodated to make sure that we could get her on and share her stories with you. So thank you very much for spending a little bit of time with us, tuning in just a few minutes earlier than normal. Let's bring our guest on, ladies and gentlemen, Anna Scott. Anna, welcome to the program.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure. Anna was part of the documentary, The Outer Edge, that many of you got to see here in Minnesota. For those of you that are still wondering, when do we get to see The Outer Edge? I don't know. I don't know when I get to see it again either. Hopefully soon. They are trying to still shop it around, not only as a documentary, but as an ongoing series. There was enough content that we had 3 one-hour specials made from it. And we condensed them into the documentary, which I thought was really kind of a fun way of showing that kind of the chasm between different modalities of supernatural beliefs, from UFOs to psychic phenomena, cryptids, and ghostly encounters. We're not so far separated. These things aren't just things that happen in segments to certain people. There are some people, and I'm one of those lucky people, that have been able to see all of this phenomena unfold. Anna Scott, our guest, is another. Anna, how old were you when you began having experiences that others would consider out of the realm of normal?
I wish I had a good answer for that, but honestly, it's always been there. So for as long as I can remember, in fact, my earliest memory is something very unusual, and I still haven't quite figured out what that is.
Well, are you willing to share your earliest memory with us tonight, Anna?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay.
So my earliest memory is being in a very strange looking crib. My guess is I was about 2.5, and the crib was unusual. It was silvery colored, and it had metal bars, and the metal bars were kind of curved. It was more like sitting in a dish rather than like in a bowl, rather than in a crib. And I remember walking around in the crib, and it was really hard to walk because the cushion underneath me was like marshmallows. And I would sink deep into it. And I remember I really wanted to go home, and I had to drink this white chalky fluid before they would let me go home. And I remember looking up at these people and they didn't look right. They looked very strange. And I remember there was a TV show. Rod Serling was the host of that show, and one of the episodes had people that almost looked similar. Their faces were very distorted. Now, I can't say that they were ET, but they weren't normal looking. And I've always wondered about that particular memory because it's the first memory that I can think of, when I was a young child.
All right. Well, now you've had a pretty vast experience growing up of different phenomena. Looking back at it, like in my instance, some of the things that happened when I was a child, I have such a foggy, vague memory of that it's almost hard to pinpoint what it was, why it was. But you've continued to have these kind of experiences throughout your life. Now, through the scope of the vision that you have today, what do you believe you were experiencing?
Well, I like to think quite analytically. I feel like I have two different parts of my brain, the analytical side and the more whimsical side. And so it's easier for me to live in that analytical world where things make sense. And I think that that really developed from growing up in a world that didn't make sense at all. Because I would see things other people didn't see. I would experience things other people didn't experience, and I would know things that I shouldn't. And so that's one of the things that really made an interest for me in the science world when I was in grade school. I don't know what that was. I know that it wasn't normal. It wasn't usual. And I know that a couple of times when I was a child, I was in the hospital. My mom has no recollection of this very strange crib. In fact, they were all pretty standard, and she has no idea what I'm talking about, but I remember it very distinctly. And it was very tall and just rounded like a fishbowl, like I said, a very unusual shape. And I could have jumped up and down on that mattress. It was so mushy and bouncy. It was really like, stepping on marshmallows. So I don't have an explanation. Never seen anything like that before. And I've been in many hospital rooms as a nurse and never seen anything quite like that. So I have to think maybe it was something else other than a hospital room.
You have talked to experiencers around the world. As a matter of fact, you head up part of the organization that helps experiencers and people that were, I don't know, is abducted the right word at this point? Have you come across anybody else that has had a similar experience or recollection of those kind of mattresses and isolettes or cribs for children as though they were there too?
Well, the interesting thing is, yes, not so much the type of environment, but having to drink some sort of chalky, white, milky substance. And what they've told me is that the reason for drinking that, there's something in there that causes an amnesia of the events that happened to you. And so I didn't want to drink that. And I remember specifically not drinking it. I was just very adamant. And then I kind of drank it. And so I don't know if that's why I remember some of it. Or, maybe it was just milk of magnesia or something. And I like to look for the reality in some of these experiences. It makes me feel better. But to answer your question, yes, there have been some similarities. And there's a lot of experiencers that have very unusual medical type memories from their early childhood.
Well, do me a favor. If you ever do encounter this alien race again and they offer you a cup, could you grab me a bottle? So on Sundays, after the Minnesota Vikings lose yet again, I can just take a shot and forget that I even watched the game.
Sometimes that would be nice, wouldn't it?
Most times it would be nice. So the possibility is that you have been visited for the majority of your life. Do you believe that alien visitations, abductions, whatever you want to call it, that they truly are generational, or are there just individuals within family units that are selected?
That's a great question. I think it varies. So for me, I don't know why, but I just did not talk about this growing up. I didn't talk about it with my parents. I didn't talk about it with my sister. And I don't know if I received early messages as a young child not to, and I just don't recall that. But it was never something that was discussed ever in my family. as I've grown up, I've reached out to my sister and we've had some conversations and some unusual experiences that we both shared. So possibly, I know many of the cases that I work on with MUFON, with Northland MUFON, it's many generations, it's multiple people in the family. So I really don't have an answer to that, whether it's, multiple generations in my family, but I know that is certainly a common theme.
As you've gotten older, have you spoken to your family members about your experiences? And if so, how have they responded? Do they also have memories of this?
Well, I did speak with an aunt of mine who has since passed on. And I spoke with her about it because I walked into her home many, many years ago, and there was clearly something wrong with the house. And it was to the point where it's quite disturbing to me. And I come to find out that my cousin, her son, who was much younger than me, had some kind of force try and push him down the stairs. So this was not unusual to her at all, but she hadn't really discussed it with anybody in the family either. And it made sense when I looked at all of these candles and how she converted to Catholicism and all of these things that happened towards the end of her life because of all of these events that were happening in our house.
Now, you're somebody who's spent time in the medical field, helping people on many different levels. When you are educating yourself regarding medical issues and maladies, do you ever find yourself leaning into, as you said in the beginning, you like the scientific approach, but do you ever find yourself leaning into the fact that some of what science appears to know or think it understands is really misinterpreting more of this supernatural and paranormal experiences?
Sometimes, yes, absolutely. When I was about 19 or 20, I convinced myself that I must have some kind of mental illness because other people didn't experience the things that I did. And I even went so far as going to see a psychiatrist. And I said, hey, something's wrong with me. Fix it for me, please. Give me the medication that I need. And they put me through a battery of tests. And the psychiatrist said, there's nothing wrong with you. You just need to go to a therapist to figure out how to live with this. And that was the first time that I realized, maybe there's something real to this. Maybe it's not all in my head. And that was actually quite helpful. But I think overall, the medical community really focuses on the hard science, and there's a real need for that.
Mhm.
We have to have real, clinically validated treatments for cancer, for instance. We can't just, say prayers and expect people to survive. But there's a place in medical science that really can't answer some of these questions. And there's a lot of researchers, quite a few physicians actually, that are really moving towards the, afterlife as being something that's real, that we don't actually die once our bodies die, that we exist in some form after that.
Wouldn't it be interesting if it turns out that the form we take after this is what people interpret to be alien? That's us devoid of the, I'm just a little closer than most. I'm bald with big eyes. So I've already kind of started to step into that realm in this lifetime, but it would be interesting, right? I mean, a lot of what people experience as ghost encounters, these short, dark shadows that move about in the room or move about just on the corners and the periphery of their eyes, are what other people that claim to have seen aliens also describe.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't have an answer. I wish I did. But even when I was a teenager, I would see beings in my doorway. And were they alien? At that time, I didn't really have a reference point. To me, I call them pirates because that's what they kind of look like. And I saw them in shades of black and grays. And so it wasn't distinct with color. And it had to be dark enough for me to be able to see them. And they were shorter, very emaciated looking creatures with what looked like eye patches. So that's why I called them pirates. And when I look back, it's like, well, that's kind of the stereotypical tall gray or even some of the short grays, right? And they would stay there for a long time sometimes. I never was afraid of them. It was just very strange and I couldn't fall asleep. And I would ask them to please go away. And sometimes they would, but most of the time they wouldn't. I would get this impression from them that they were just there checking on me. And it was just very weird. And so I just wanted the weirdness to stop. But
Now,
certainly,
when you saw them for the communication, would you label it telepathic with the way that they spoke to you and communicated?
that's a great question. So, yes, but maybe not in the way that most people would think. So, when I've communicated with spirits as well as what we would call aliens, it's always an understanding of a concept or an idea or something that they want me to know or that I want them to know. It's never actually words. So, I'll just understand what it is that they're trying to communicate. And it's really difficult to define that better than an understanding, but that's the best word we have in English for it.
Okay. All right. As you've grown up and talked to people, become an investigator for MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, and then become kind of the head of the North Dakota branch of MUFON as a director. Have you noticed for yourself an uptick in what we would consider to be alien activity? And because you've now put the spotlight on it and you're trying to help others, does that seem to call them to you at any point? The aliens?
I don't think so. So in my experience, it seems to come in batches. So I'll have a lot of experiences over like a 1 or 2 year period, and then things level off. And I haven't noticed that it's increased with respect to what we would call aliens. I'm very cautious when it comes to spirits and, our dearly departed or entities or whatever you would like to call them, because the more attention I pay to that, the more I notice them, the more they bother me. So I purposely try and ignore it, honestly.
Have you ever been with somebody that's an experiencer and shared an experience with them as though you knew that you were being observed as well?
I have had a number of experiences where I was not the only person in it. Um, Generally, in those experiences, it doesn't work out so well for me. One such case that I kind of go back to because it really, for me, had a lot of meaning was when I was a teenager and I was with a couple of friends. And we were walking alongside a park in a street. It was after dark, and so we weren't walking in the park. And I looked up over my shoulder. I had that feeling like something was watching me. And there were some orbs there about the size of a basketball. I called them the bubbles because that's what they look like to me. They look like these translucent orbs. Again, I didn't have context because we didn't really talk a lot about that in the 80s.
Right.
And so I said to my friends, oh my God, they're back, run. And so we started running and we ran for about a block, not even. And at the end of where we were running to was a small bridge that went over a creek. And as we were approaching the bridge, I looked back behind me and I saw that one of the orbs looked like it was about to smack into the head of one of my friends. And so I yelled out to her, watch out. And she looked back and she ducked at the appropriate time. I know she saw it. My other friend, I don't think she saw anything. But as we got to the bridge, the bubbles went down the creek. They left us alone. And so we started slowing down because it was obvious that they were going in another direction at that point. And my best friend at the time, and I won't mention her name, but she was crying. She was really upset. She, was very, very frightened. And this was not the first incident she had with me that was unusual. So she didn't know what was going on and she wanted to know what they were. And I told her, I don't know what they are, but I know you don't want to end up in one. And I don't have any conscious memories of actually being in a bubble, but I somehow understand that there's some kind of transport vehicle. And I don't have an answer to why I understand that. Now, I also, whenever I tell this story, I also want to make sure that people understand that I wasn't afraid of these. I didn't think they were going to cause me harm.
Mm-hmm.
It was more teenage rebellion. It's like, I don't want to do what you say. You need to get out of my life and go away, and running away from it. So at no time did I think I was going to be harmed or injured in any way, or my friends. I just didn't want to do what they wanted me to do at that moment.
I have a question that popped up, and Lee Warner asked it, and I'm trying to figure out a way to phrase the question without leading the witness too much. But is there anything special? It sounds so tacky. Is there anything special about Anna Scott that you are the one having these experiences, not just alien and strange craft, but psychic phenomena, ghosts, cryptid kind of moments? Medically, is there anything that sets you apart from maybe every other person?
Well, so I don't know if it would be making me special. In fact, I would say it's the opposite.
Okay.
So, and I'll kind of defer in part to a study that Opus did along with Kathy Martin and some other members of MUFON on experiencers. And one of the things that they noted was that there was a very high percentage of people who were experiencers that also reported autoimmune conditions. And there's something about autoimmune conditions, and I don't know what it is. I myself have one. And what got me on that track of looking at that, because I never connected the two until I went to my first MUFON meeting. And I'm standing with a group of people that are a little too young to be using canes and walkers. And everybody was talking about a specific medication. It happened to be a TNF blocker, a biologic medication that they were on. And I thought, how strange is this that so few people actually have these conditions? And yet here's a whole group of people that have had UFO experiences and have this condition. And so whether or not it's related, I don't know. I know that there's some research going on with that. I know that Gary Nolan is involved with some of that. But with most autoimmune conditions, there's a genetic component, and then there's some kind of environmental trigger. And what that environmental trigger is, they don't know. I have a suspicion that it has something to do with contact, because the amount of people that have these kinds of experiences, regardless of whether they're alien contact or ghost contact or other types of contact, with cryptids and such, I think that might be the trigger. It's really unusual that there's such a high percentage of people.
Well, my wife Winnie collects autoimmune issues like honor badges for the Girl Scouts, right? She's got lupus, she's got Crohn's, she's got fibromyalgia. She's teetering sadly on the precipice of MS. So it does seem that there's something going on there, but I guess it had never crossed my mind. She's obviously a paranormal experiencer and sensitive to a lot of things, but I'd never put the two and two together in that way. Lee's specific question regarding you and being somewhat different. Are you O negative blood type?
Oh, well, my mom's O negative, and I'm something called weak D. So I'm technically O positive, but I really should only receive O negative blood. I have a very weakly reactive positive result. Probably don't want to get into that too much, the medical aside, but I'm kind of somewhere between O positive and O negative. But my mom is O negative.
Interesting. All right. So there is something about that. And I'm sure this is not the first time you've heard of this correlation with abductees.
It is not.
What do you think in that case? Is it that it's kind of an obscure blood type, which again could open you up to autoimmune issues because your physiology might not necessarily be matching with that of the races that you're connecting with or the humans that your alien DNA may be connecting with?
Well, I've wondered where some of those interesting tidbits of my DNA came from. I really don't have an answer to that. I wish I knew.
Mhm.
I have a lot of hope that maybe some information will come, especially from Stanford. But yeah, I have some interesting DNA that's actually quite rare, and so I can't really donate blood or donate plasma either. I have interesting antibodies. They're not quite sure why, and I would like to know though. So I hope they find that out.
Let's do this. I want to move into different elements of your life as well, and dealing with the paranormal in the spiritual sense of ghosts, and also talk about cryptids and other elements of what your life has experienced. And tonight, folks, we are going to get the slimmest sliver of this woman's life story, because it is filled with high strangeness. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back with Anna Scott. We'll continue our conversation right here on your home for everything paranormal. I'm Dave Schrader, and this is our Paranormal 60. Welcome back to the program, and do me a favor, my darklings. On every program guide, there is a list of the sponsors and advertisers that support this show, support our discussions. They don't think we're crazy. Well, they might think we're crazy, but they're still willing to sponsor and support these discussions. Please support them. It takes just a few moments. You hear me talking about it, and this, I promise you, every product that we talk about on this show, I also use, because I wanted to make sure that the items that I'm talking about and bringing to you are items worth having and something that I'd be proud to be behind. And that is the way I feel about every one of the sponsors from the beginning to today that we have worked with on the Paranormal 60. So again, please go check them out. They are phenomenal, and they've got an open mind and an open heart for the weird things that we love to talk about on this program. Anna, I am ready to start diving into different elements of this, because I want to try to hit the different parts of the mosaic of your life and then talk about tying it together near the end of the show as well as we can tonight. So we've talked a little bit about the possibility of alien interaction in your life. Real quickly, specifically, have you personally seen a craft which you believe is alien or interdimensional, not of this earth, in
Yes,
nature?
multiple times.
And how close have you gotten to one of these craft?
Well, I mean, if you include the bubbles, close enough to touch. But the last one I saw was about the size of an Amazon warehouse. And it was at least several blocks away. But it was massive, so it was very clear to see.
Now, I want people to let that marinate for a second in their brains, because you say something like as big as a Amazon warehouse. There are some compelling pieces of audio out there from experiencers. There is one that took place in Illinois, and I think it was about 25 years ago, where a craft was seen over 3 or 4 jurisdictions as it was making its way through. They said it was as big as a 10-story building. And police in each jurisdiction thought the police in the other jurisdiction were pulling their legs and having a joke with them until they saw this thing. Anna, help me understand. How are we not scrambling war jets and the military out when something this big and imposing? Because that can't be just something that you look at the old radar screen and tap it a few times and go, I think it's just birds, right? This is as big as a warehouse building hovering in the sky and moving through the sky. When we hear elements of that I think is what makes a lot of people stand back and question everything regarding claims of UFO and alien activity, because there would have to be more people seeing it, especially if it's that expansive.
Well, that particular sighting, there was somebody else that I know for sure saw it, and that was a little girl. So this happened, in the town of Cavalier, North Dakota. So it's a local to me sighting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not too far away from Cavalier Air Station. And there's all kinds of interesting things with that air station. Right now, it's tracking all kinds of interesting objects in orbit and beyond. So it has lots of interesting capabilities. But what was most notable to me in that experience is that something called the Oz factor, something coined by Jenny Randles, if you're familiar with the term, where the things around you change. It's almost like you're in kind of a bubble, a time warp of some sort. So all of a sudden there was no sound at all. And this was a residential area in a small town at the very edge of town. There was no cars, there was no birds, there was no dogs barking in the background. The only thing I could hear, and I was suddenly aware that everything was quiet. The only thing I could hear was eking sound that when I walked a little farther down the road, I saw was from a swing that a little girl was on. And I stood there in the road looking between that house and another at this huge warehouse-sized white object, just slowly gliding in the sky. And that should have been very unusual. It was, I believe it was a Sunday night in a small town. People are outside. It wasn't late. It was still light out, of course. And the little girl got off the swing because she noticed me just standing strangely in the street, and turned around and yelled to her mom, "Mom, what is that?" And she's pointing to it. And then I never saw the mom, but the side door of the home opened up and I could hear very clearly every little tiny thing that was going on over there, which I shouldn't have been able to hear. I was far enough away. And I could hear a voice saying, I won't use the little girl's name, but I could hear a voice saying, "Get in the house." And so I don't know if the mom saw it or not, but the little girl was kind of arguing. She was like, "But Mom, what is that?" And as she's walking, and then she went in the house. And I probably stood in the street for a good 20 minutes. And eventually I got bored, and I don't understand this. I got bored, and, it kept moving. It was moving slowly towards the Canadian border. And I started walking, and I occasionally would look over between the houses. Oh yeah, it's still there. Okay. Just kept walking, and I walked about another block. And as I turned onto the corner of their kind of main street in that town, all of a sudden I could start hearing things again. And it was almost like this rush of noise that was really, really loud to me because it had been so quiet. And I noticed it. And I thought that was kind of strange. And I kept walking. And about a block further, there was a little gazebo area where you could sit down. And so I sat down and I pulled my phone out of my pocket and I started scrolling through Facebook. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, what the heck? What was I thinking? I had my phone. Why didn't I take pictures? How did I get bored? I mean, how do you get bored? I'm an investigator, right? How on earth could I have been bored? That none of it made any sense. And so, yeah, in long story short, I wasn't the only one that saw it. The little girl certainly saw it, but I don't know if anybody else saw it. We didn't get any reports to MUFON. So I'm not sure, but that happens all the time in these kinds of cases.
Chig from the chat room says, has Anna suffered any type of radiation sickness or effects from these craft?
Hopefully not. I haven't had any radiation sickness that I'm aware of. Of course, I've got some autoimmune stuff, so I'm a little suspicious, but nothing that I'm aware of. Thank goodness.
Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah, we certainly wouldn't want it impacting or affecting you. Let's start to swing a little bit over to the side of ghosts and ghostly phenomena. What is one of the most impactful experiences you can relate to us regarding your own life?
Ooh. I thought about whether or not I wanted to talk about this, and I think it's important because a few years ago I had a situation where, and before I get into that, I should mention that I always tried to keep that part of me quiet, because in the paranormal world, it's just not okay to be into everything and experience everything, right? You're either into UFOs or you're into ghosts or you're into Bigfoot, but it's not the whole shebang. And so a long time ago, I just chose UFOs as the one that I felt okay talking about. But I had an incident where I got up about 10 o'clock at night. I hadn't been able to fall asleep. And I knew that there was somebody in my kitchen. And I didn't understand who it was. Usually I can tell if I know them and I can tell if I don't. I just feel that. I didn't see anybody, which isn't unusual. I just knew that they were there. And I felt like this was somebody who had recently passed. And maybe they couldn't figure out how to communicate, or I knew they wanted something from me, but I didn't know what. And this may be kind of mean, but most of the time I just try and pretend that I don't see them so they don't pester me. And
No, it's not mean. It's a coping mechanism. That's totally fine.
it is. But I acknowledged him, and I say him, but I didn't know if it was male or female. I didn't have a good enough sense of who this person was. And I just said, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Can you please go away? I need to go to sleep. And I went back to bed, and I still couldn't sleep. And I got up to get something to drink, and they were still there. And I said, please, can you just please go away? And I turned around, and I ended up going to bed. And I didn't understand who that could have been. But when I woke up in the morning, I had a text from someone dear to me that his son unfortunately committed suicide that night. Mm. And had I known, I might have been able to do something, but I'd never actually met his son. And so I'm almost positive that's who it was. And I hope he was able to find the help that he needed to go where he needed to go. But that was the moment that I'm like, I can't hide from this because it can be harmful. If I have this gift, if you want to call it a gift, I need to try and do something with it. And it took me a long time before I actually told this person what had happened that night. Because honestly, I felt terrible about it. I felt so guilty. Because again, had I known, I could have maybe done something different. But I didn't.
But had it been your job to do something different, it would have made itself known to you in a different way. I don't want you to carry that burden with you either, Anna, because, we have these experiences. Sometimes the experience itself isn't that you were able to fix it, but that you were able to give this person corroboration that, this person is fine where they are now, that they're in a place that's better for them. And although it might be hard, especially in somebody whose life has been taken by their own hand, it's comforting to some people to know that they're not lost. They're not in a hellscape environment. It's knowing that they've reached out. And sometimes our grieving is so heavy upon our heart that we can't let them in, and they found a way to communicate through you.
Absolutely. And I think that was helpful for him, knowing that it wasn't the end, and I wish I could have done things differently. And there's some more to the story that, would impact his maybe ability to communicate with me, that I'm going to keep private just for my friend's sake. But yeah, I just wish I was more open about it at that time, because I think it would have made a bigger difference than what it made. But I totally agree with what you're saying.
Well, but it also taught you a valuable lesson so that going forward, you might be in a position to do something differently.
Absolutely.
And I also remind yourself, Anna, that you are somebody who's committed to the scientific and medical community. You're helping people all the time, and your unique perspectives and insights are probably doing a lot more for people than you've ever given yourself credit for.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say. Even in my job, I remember years ago, there was a teenage boy that passed away, and we did everything we could, and we just couldn't save him, unfortunately. And I knew he was up in the corner of the room, and I could feel him watching me prepare his body. His family was going to come. And one of the other staff, a nursing assistant, came in, and he's like, "Do you see him up there?" And I hadn't said anything. And it's like, thank you. I'm so glad that you know he's up there too. And I ended up telling the mom that later on that night before she left, only because, as strange as it probably sounded, I know that I would want to know that if that was my child.
Right.
So that they weren't just gone. But it was intensely strong. It was really difficult to care for him after he passed with him watching. It was really strange, but it was really difficult too.
I would assume, yeah. But again, it's probably surreal for them, and for them to see somebody with empathy and kindness preparing them and taking care of them and helping to ease that next moment for the family that was about to come in. I'm sure that was something that brought a lot of peace to his soul as well.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
It brought some peace to my soul, knowing I wasn't the only one that knew he was up in the corner of the room. So
All right. Let's talk a little bit about the psychic aspect and psychic phenomena. Obviously, dealing with beings from somewhere, whether they're interdimensional or outer space or interdimensional. You've said that you get messages almost in a telepathic way, not the way we think, where you're hearing the chatter in your head, but it's a knowing. You're also having that you're not hearing the ghost, you're not seeing the ghost, but you know that they're there. There is still a connection. And again, that's so powerful, right? It shows how connected we are to the world around us if we can quiet and be in the moment there. Having that kind of psychic phenomena happen, what other types of experiences have awoken in you?
Well, probably the biggest one is that I seem to know things that I shouldn't. And growing up as a kid, that got me into a lot of trouble. And so I generally will keep that to myself. As somebody who's had other people kind of read me without my permission, I understand how unsettling that can be. But probably knowing things that I shouldn't. An example is a family member was complaining about how much he had to pay in taxes that year, and it was quite a bit. And I had been to this person's home to pick something up out of his garage. I didn't go into his home, but he gave me the code, and so I was in his garage to pick up a couple of things. And so he was like, "Do you know how much I had to pay in taxes?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do." And I blurted out the entire number, and it was over $34,000, to the exact penny. And of course, he's like, "How did you know that?" And he decided that I must have went into his computer and looked at his taxes. And I don't know how I know that. It just popped into my head. And so having that.
Well, you know how you knew it, because he was focused on it and it was something that he wanted to relate to you and apparently was weighing on him, and being empathic and being sensitive. You're the respondent. You're the transmitter was sent. You picked up that signal.
Yes, but I don't think he knew he was sending it. And so he had other ideas about where I got that from. So, it gets me in trouble sometimes, and definitely caused some trust issues there. And so I learned as a child to really try and suppress that, because people don't like you knowing those things.
Have you learned to suppress it, or have you learned to suppress saying that you know these things?
Oh, good question. Saying that I know these things.
Atta girl. Don't suppress the power. Don't suppress the power. Suppress the desire to share what you know. That's probably a much better and probably a bigger superpower, being able to keep your mouth shut, because that would be tough for me. That would be tough.
Hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. Yes.
I can only imagine. Let's take our final break, and we'll come back and discuss the concept of other beings, other things that we may be sharing our world and reality with, that other people might take for granted. And then I want to kind of examine an element of this, of why are more and more people coming to grips with this at this point, because it seems more and more are straddling many different lines. They're no longer just ufologists or ufology fans. They're not just ghost fans. They're not just cryptid fans. and I use the word fan probably improperly there, but you get my gist, is that, it's becoming a more expansive universe for everybody. We'll do that when we return. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. That's Anna Scott, and we've got more Paranormal 60 right after this.
Hey, beautiful souls. Winnie Schrader here from Love and Lotus Tarot, your guide through the energy shifts, emotional waves, and the cosmic chaos we've all been feeling lately. I mean, let's be real for a second. The world feels loud right now, right? There's so much noise, so much tension, so much uncertainty. Between the news, social media, and just trying to keep up with life, it's easy to feel like you're stuck on this never-ending roller coaster that just won't slow down. But here's the thing. Even though we can't control the outside chaos, we can learn to navigate through it. And that's where I come in. I mean, lately, have you been feeling like everything is happening to you instead of for you? Are you finding it hard to stay grounded when everyone seems just as ungrounded as you are? Or maybe you've been questioning your direction, wondering if the path you are on still aligns with who you are becoming. If any of this hits home, this is for you. It's like we're all trying to move forward, but the universe keeps throwing us stupid curveballs. But here's your reminder. You are not powerless. So all you got to do is reach out and book a reading with me today so I can help you navigate through those troubled waters and gain back control of your life. You can book a reading today. Just visit me at lovelotustarot.com. Again, book a reading with me today at lovelotustarot.com.
All right, Anna Scott is our guest this evening. We are talking about being caught in the crossfire of a paranormal hurricane. Kind of stealing from the Rolling Stones there a little bit, but Anna is a lifelong experiencer of many different modalities of the supernatural and the paranormal. We've talked a little bit about some of her alien and or alien-like contact, her spiritual contact, her psychic awakenings and intuition. These creatures that are being sighted, Bigfoot, other strange dogman creatures and other shadowy figures, long, lanky beings that are seen kind of just creeping around the peripheral of our reality. What do you think is taking place with that in the research and many interviews you've done?
I'm not sure. I wish I had a better answer than I'm not sure. So I've had a normal experience, because it was normalized for me, of regularly hearing wood knocks growing up. And it's the one thing that my sister also heard. We just assumed that that was normal forest noise. My parents had a cabin in north central Minnesota, and we would always hear that. And it never occurred to me that it could be Bigfoot. And I say that also knowing that when we would hear wood knocks, I would see what I assumed was black bear in the woods. So many, many times I saw a bear in the woods. Well, what I really saw was this big, hairy black thing, basically. And I would hear wood knocks. And so I never really thought too much about Bigfoot, but of course now I know better. And, as I became an adult and looked at it a little bit deeper, I realized, oh, okay. So maybe there was something to that. And I'm not alone in that. There's lots of people that see unusual things, as you know. That's the only cryptid that I've seen. I haven't seen any of the other things that people report. I wonder personally if it isn't an ET of some sort, because there's a lot of UFO sightings when people are having Bigfoot sightings. So I'm not sure. I wish we could get some real evidence, get that actual fur with the DNA, right? That's kind of the holy grail of evidence in the Bigfoot community. But I would like to know exactly what they are.
What is going on in your estimation, talking to the many different people that you've spoken with? What's the commonality and thread that you're seeing between experiencers? And is something bigger opening?
Well, I guess where all of this has led me to in my life is the idea of consciousness and the consciousness connection. There has to be some level of consciousness involved in this. Oftentimes, these experiences and sightings involve a manipulation of consciousness. There's a lot of interesting research. Jacques Vallée is pretty much convinced that this is all consciousness-based. I'm not sure if it's all consciousness-based. I think there's a physical element as well. But I think it's really consciousness that connects all of these different genres of the paranormal.
Well, it does seem interesting, right? That once you've kind of cracked the shell of disbelief and you start to accept the unacceptable, the things that you've seen and witnessed, it's like it allows more in. It allows your vision to be less clouded so that you might be seeing more. You might be experiencing this stuff may be around us all the time, but it's who is starting to pay attention. How cognizant are you allowing yourself to be in order to have these experiences?
Yes, and there's also just the concept that it's more acceptable now. It's more socially acceptable. As you know, there's lots and lots of TV shows out there that explore all of these different things. They're very popular. It's part of our pop culture. And so once people are talking about it and saying, yeah, I watched that Bigfoot show or that ghost show, it becomes easier for other people to say, oh, yeah, I'm kind of interested in that too. And it really becomes more socially acceptable to even talk about it, because that hasn't always been the case. I mean, especially with ufology, they thought we were all running around with tinfoil hats and we were kind of nuts. At least with ghosts, people could feel comforted that maybe, their loved one, when they left us, didn't actually cease to exist. I think that's a little bit more acceptable to people because it gives them hope of life after death.
I agree. I mean, and it gives us an opportunity to allow us to expand our consciousness in different directions, right? When we stop holding and adhering to the limitations that the world and the people of it put on us, there's a lot of really remarkable, magical things that still take place. And I think that you don't have to walk into these places in a sense of fear, right? When you are open to the possibilities and you do it with an open heart, not a place of fear, I think, like you and I, we get to experience more. And there are people out there that look at Anna and Dave and they're like, you guys are stoned. There's no way you've had all these, I'd believe it if you saw ghosts or demons or Bigfoot or aliens, but there's no way you saw them all. But it's interesting that they will put it in that context that I'd believe it if you saw one of them, but you can't be seeing all of them. That means you believe that there's a possibility all of those exist. Why are we limited to only one? It's not, ice cream. We're allowed to taste many different varieties and flavors, right? Just because we may have a predilection for one doesn't mean that we aren't interested in experiencing the rest.
Absolutely. And there's so many people like you and I, Dave. Most people, I think, that experience the phenomena experience other elements of different types of the phenomenon as well. I don't think it's a unique thing at all to experience most of them at the same time.
You also work and help me again. What is the name of the organization? Not MUFON, but the element of helping experiencers.
So yeah, that's part of MUFON. It's the MUFON's Experiencer Resource Team. And it was first started by Kathy Martin, if you're familiar with her.
Right. Kathy is, if I believe this, Kathy is, I believe she's the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. Is that right?
She is, yes.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. She's not as involved as she used to be. She's retired now, but she's still involved with the ERT. And yes, with MUFON, Northland MUFON especially, but all of the other chapters as well in MUFON, we do hard science investigations into what people are seeing.
Now that can sound scary to some people that are afraid, oh, hard science, you're going to think I'm nuts. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to be looked at like I'm crazy or I'm hallucinating, right? I just want to detail that don't get hung up on the word hard science as the way they explore this. They're doing it for your benefit. It's not to come in and say you're nuts, you're crazy, but to take a scientific approach and understanding so that they can help you understand what the experience is and what it means.
Absolutely. And some of the things that really give, witness testimony credibility is when they say, "You're going to think I'm crazy." And that immediately makes me think they're probably not crazy. And yeah, so we want to figure out what it is that people are saying if we can. And
Mhm.
so oftentimes, people will submit cases that are Starlink or maybe Venus or something like that. But we make sure that
And
we
what she's referring to, folks, is people are reporting what they believe to be craft in the sky or strange formations, which turn out to be the Starlink, which we've seen here recently in Minnesota. I think just the other day there was a big report of this string of lights that are moving across the sky, and that is Starlink, or misinterpreting a planet that might appear to be flickering and almost moving through the sky slowly, and it turns out that it is nothing more than a planet.
Yes, and we work really hard to make sure that we can provide clear evidence that that's what they saw. We don't dismiss anything just because it sounds like it could be. We make sure that it actually is before we identify it as an identified object.
And I like Paranormal Pixie's thought on this. The metaphysical and supernatural is simply that which science has yet to understand. And that's okay. The problem is the ego of science, in a lot of ways, is that it has to be repeatable in this format, in this way. And sometimes miracles just happen. Amazing things occur that don't always translate or make sense. And you can't make them happen over and over again.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is the small number of cases that we come across where we can't identify what they saw. Those are the really interesting ones.
Has it ever been, have you ever gotten to the point where you just feel like, I got to step away from this because I'm getting a lot of false positives, a lot of people that are seeing things that are just Starlink or a misidentified planet or a plane, and maybe I'm just wasting my time. Does that ever happen to you?
No, I'm actually quite tenacious when it comes to that because filtering out those things, I'm also able to do a lot of education. And that's one of the things our chapter in MUFON does is education. Every month we have monthly meetings to do just that. But no, people are seeing something in the sky. They don't know what it is. Sometimes I can offer them some closure that, you know what, we know what that was. Other times it's a validation that, hey, you saw something really cool and we don't know what the heck that was.
Yeah. Great work that you're doing out there, Anna. And I appreciate the respect you've shown me and the time and compassion in helping me understand things as we work through the creation of the documentary series, and your willingness to come on and talk about your experiences, not just tie it to everybody else's, but the fact that you two are walking this path to try to understand and try to help people that are in these places that may be experiencing things and feeling alone or lost, that there is hope and that there are people that are out here to believe you and at least try to give you a guiding hand to the answers.
Yeah, and that's, the ERT, the Experiencer Resource Team, we don't do any investigations. We are there as a listening ear. We can offer resources, referrals to therapists so people can learn how to manage that aspect in their life. Sometimes hypnotherapists if they want to explore that area. But in the ERT, we don't do any investigation at all. That's not what it's for. We're there to really help people work through it.
Have you ever met with multiple people from the same area that don't know that they're coming to you, that are sharing basically the same story and same type of experiences?
Absolutely, all the time.
All right. And if people that are listening right now around the world, I know you're in North Dakota, but if they are looking for somebody that they can feel comfortable talking to, and they don't want to just reach out to a stranger in their area, Anna, how do they reach out to you to maybe get directed to somebody that can put them at ease and make them feel comfortable about this?
Well, they can always submit a report no matter where in the world they live to MUFON. And MUFON gives you two options: report a sighting or report an abduction. And if you report the abduction, then it usually comes to the ERT. But one of the things is that my passion is traveling all over the world. And I've connected with many, many different other UFO organizations and paranormal organizations. In fact, I just came back from Norway month and a half ago and was working with Project Hesdalen up there. So there's, no matter where you live on this planet, there's probably an organization near you if you want something a little bit more local.
What do you think is going on, Anna? Have we really achieved a new level of evolution in humanity that we're ready for these changes?
I don't think so. I
But
guess
more and more people are coming forward. More and more people are having these experiences. Or are they? I say that, and then it's brought to mind how many people have shaken their head at me when I told them what I do, and they're like, "Oh, you believe in the paranormal?" And then they go, "Well, when I was a kid or when I was a teenager." They all have that one little thing niggling at the back of their head that they still can't make sense of or complain. So maybe it's always there. It's just now it's becoming commonplace or more acceptable to share.
I think that's the key. It's just more acceptable to share. People don't look at you like you're crazy as much as they would have 20 or even 30 years ago. But especially in the last 10 years with all of the coverage on the news with UFOs and all of the TV shows, it really normalizes things and people are more willing to talk about it.
Well, Anna, keep doing the great work that you're doing. And as more strange and unusual things occur, let us know. And you can join us any Wednesday on a Supernatural News Night if you have updates of a really wild UFO sighting or some kind of strange visitation that seems to be taking place in an area. Would you do that and come back and visit with us?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Anna.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
My pleasure. Anna Scott, delightful guest. Tonight was a little different. We started an hour early. This is not a normal thing. This was simply because of the issues I've been having with internet connectivity and trying to get things handled. And this was the time that was best for Anna to come visit with us. So we made this exception so that we could have her live on the show and I could incorporate your questions. I knew this would be important, and I knew some of you might have things that you'd like to know and weigh in on. So I wanted to make sure that she was live with us to give us that in and give us that opportunity. We'll be talking with Anna again on the show. I can guarantee you that. Thank you all for tuning in tonight and sharing your time with me, because it does mean quite a bit. And there are some really exciting things coming up. One big thing coming up soon that I'll be able to talk to you about. And I'm excited about this and excited for what it means. And I hope that you'll keep tuning in to find out what that is. But I also want to let you know, I'm going to be traveling all over. As a matter of fact, this coming weekend, if you don't have any plans and you'd like to celebrate my birthday with me, I'm going to be 58 years old on November 22nd. And my good friend Cindy Keza shares that same birthday. And we happen to be together in Napanock, New York with our buddy Shane Pittman. We're going to be doing an event out at the haunted Shanley Hotel. Shanley, not the Stanley in Colorado, the Shanley Hotel in Napanock. And there are still some seats available if you'd like to come in and hear our presentations, get a chance to ghost hunt and investigate with us. There's also, you can purchase gallery sessions with Cindy, so you can come in and have Cindy do readings. So if you'd like to be a part of that, check out my website, darknessevents.com, darknessevents.com. And a gentle reminder that coming up in December, the three of us will be in Lexington, Kentucky, and we're going to be doing a presentation at, of all places, a comedy club. But we'll be there because we're using it on an off night so that we can come and meet and greet. It's got the kind of seating, it's got the kind of opportunity and intimate setting for us to get to know you and be a part of that. So thank you very much for tuning in and being a part of the show tonight and being a part of what we love to do and what we love to discuss here. Now, before we say goodbye, I think it's important to share that what Anna opened up about tonight isn't just a list of encounters. It's a roadmap. It's a reminder that the paranormal, it isn't just a set of isolated categories, but it's an intricate network of experiences that may all stem from a deeper connected source. UFOs, cryptids, spirits, even psychic phenomena. Maybe they aren't separate chapters. Maybe they're just pages in the same book. And what really stands out in Anna's mix of science and sensitivity, she's willing to gather the data, but also willing to listen to the experiencer. She honors the human side of this mystery as much as the evidential side. And if nothing else, her journey challenges us to stay curious, to hold space for the things that don't fit our expectations yet. Because the truth isn't always found in the lab. Sometimes it shows up in your peripheral vision, in the middle of the night, or out there in the sky when no one else is looking. Thank you all for being a part of tonight's exploration, and may the darkness of this world seem just a bit brighter with the information we share here on your Paranormal 60. And don't forget, you can also check out my show every Sunday night, The Paranormal 360. So wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, just go check out Paranormal 360, and you'll be able to find brand new episodes that'll be released audio-wise on Sunday night, late night, or you can listen live on WCCO Radio. That's 830 WCCO in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or just ask your smart device to launch WCCO Radio every Sunday night, 7 to 9 p.m. Central. And then you can join me here every Monday and Wednesday night on our YouTube channel at the Paranormal 60. And if you're subscribed to the Paranormal 60 network, you'll be able to listen free to our podcasts and all of the other great shows that are part of my network. Thank you, my darklings. I love you.